a crowded upper room in Jerusalem. Friends gathered around the table to share a simple meal: bread, olives, fruit, cheese, wine. But as they ate, they reminisced over the 3 years they had spent with this remarkable carpenter from Galilee. They had seen him restore sight to the blind, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons from troubled souls, and Lazarus, he had brought Lazarus out of the tomb. They had seen remarkable, almost unbelievable things. But as they reminisced and remembered, they also thought back to that triumphal entry into Jerusalem just days ago. It had been an amazing experience, but it seemed to have riled the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees. They were plotting even more fervently to kill Jesus. And the Roman soldiers, they had come from all over the kingdom into Jerusalem for the Passover because so many Jews had come. They were afraid of a political uprising, some sort of rebellion. They were all over the city, alert for even a whisper of some sort of political unrest. So as these friends gathered at the table to reminisce, a little darkness of fear was in their hearts. And then a remarkable thing happened. Jesus rose from the table, took off his outer garment, wrapped a towel around his waist, took a basin, and began to go from person to person, washing their feet. Simon Peter might have been the first. You see, Simon Peter was a very close friend of Jesus. He was in that inner circle of disciples. He was one of the people that was there for the transfiguration. When Jesus was with Moses and Elijah, he was never very far from Jesus' side. And Jesus had said he intended to give him the keys of the kingdom. But Jesus knelt at his feet and began to wash them. Peter protested, but Jesus insisted. Gently and carefully and tenderly, he washed Peter's feet. Matthew might have been next. You remember Matthew? Matthew had been a tax collector. He had been at his booth collecting taxes when Jesus had called him. Now, tax collectors were a hated class amongst the Jews. You see, they were collaborators with the Romans. They not only collected the taxes that were due, they collected extra, and it lined their pockets. Even knowing that Matthew had abused and oppressed his people, Jesus knelt at Matthew's feet, tenderly, carefully, and gently washed his feet. Judas might have been next. He was not being too close to Jesus on this night. He already knew what he was going to do, and he might have been thinking about what he was going to do with those 30 pieces of silver. He might have been a little uneasy when Jesus came to him, but Jesus knelt in front of Judas, gently, tenderly, and carefully washed his feet. He made his way around the circle, and at the end, on his other side from Peter, would have been James and John. You know, they were the sons of Zebedee. They had been fishermen, mending nets. When Jesus had said, "Hey, come, follow me, I will make you fishers of men," they were also in that inner circle. They had been with Peter at the transfiguration. Now, they didn't always get the message. Remember, they were the ones who said, "Hey, when you get to heaven, let us sit at your right hand." And Jesus had to explain very gently that that was not the kind of kingdom he had in mind, that his kingdom would be one where leaders became servants. He comes to James and John, and he kneels in front of James, and gently and tenderly and carefully washes his feet. That night, James, Matthew, Peter will all flee for their lives. They will desert Jesus in his darkest hour. None of them will be at the foot of the cross. But John, often called the beloved disciple, he's the one that will go the whole road with Jesus. He will be at the foot of the cross, and from the cross, Jesus will say, son, regard your mother. Mother, regard your son. And John will be faithful to that commission. He will take Mary out of Jerusalem, out of the persecution and the turbulence, and he will take her to Ephesus. And tradition tells us that John faithfully took care of Mary until her death. And so Jesus kneels in front of John, gently and carefully and tenderly washes his feet. Having finished, he returns to the table, puts his robe back on, and looks at all his friends. He sees they are confused. He says, my friends, do you understand what I have done to you? Now, the disciples are not confused about foot washing. It was a common custom of hospitality at the time. When you went to a house, the owner, the master, would give you a basin and a towel to wash your muddy or dusty feet. And in an affluent household, a servant or a slave would have done that menial task. But when they arrived in this upper room this evening, there was no basin, no servant or slave to help them, and Jesus hadn't even asked them to wash their feet. And here, in the middle of a meal, he is getting up to perform this gesture of hospitality. But of course, they were most amazed that Jesus was doing it, the man they called their Lord and teacher. Understanding their confusion, Jesus gently explained, you have called me your teacher and Lord, and I am. If I, as your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you should wash each other's feet. The disciples begin to understand. You see, Jesus has been telling them for 3 years about this new kind of kingdom. But tonight, in this room, he has shown a kingdom where leaders become servants. And more than that, where everyone is included. You see, he's washed Matthew's feet, and you know what kind of man Matthew has been. Their minds are whirling with this final understanding. They're finally getting what Jesus is about. And then something startling happens. Jesus turns to Judas and said, you're going to betray me. Here, take this piece of bread. And Judas takes the piece of bread and slips out into the night. The remaining disciples are amazed. Jesus has just washed Judas's feet. He knew he was going to betray him, and he just washed Judas's feet. This is a new development. And Jesus tells them, my children, I'm going to give you a new command, that you love one another as I have loved you. The Greek word that Jesus speaks here for love is a very particular word. In Greek, there are various words for love. One is eros, for romantic or sexual love. One is philia, for friendship. The third is agape, and it's a self-sacrificing kind of love. It's the love that is willing to put the other in front of oneself. It's the kind of love that a mother feels for a newborn baby. And Jesus says, you are to agape each other as I have agape you. And the disciples reflect on that moment when Jesus stood in front of them. When he knelt and took their feet, their decidedly unlovely feet, their calloused, dirty feet with ragged, dirty toenails, no pedicured toenails, and salt scrubbed feet here. The feet of men who walk from place to place, and he has taken the most unlovely part of them in his hand and washed it gently, tenderly, and carefully. You are to love one another as I have loved you. In a few moments, you'll have the opportunity to come here and sit while someone washes your feet. and then in turn, watch another person's feet. This simple, ancient ritual will be repeated throughout the world this day, thousands of times. In Rome, the Pope Francis, has already knelt at the feet of 12 prisoners, including a Muslim woman, and washed them, as Jesus did in that upper room, and as Christians have been doing for 20 centuries. Whether you choose to come forward and participate in the ritual or only watch from the pew, think back. Think of that room with the friends around the table. Think of that man who went to each of them, to Matthew, who had been a tax collector, a grievous sinner, to Peter, who will before the night is out deny him 3 times, to Judas, who will betray him, to James, who will flee for his life and will desert him. He has gone to each of them, intensely and gently, and washed their feet. He leaves us with a final command. We are to love one another as he loved them. This, not doctrine and dogma, not belief, not creed. This love, Jesus tells us, is to be the mark of his kingdom. Agape